I'd like to start with a salute to the flag. Richard, would you lead us in the flag salute?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Well, I think it would be appropriate to welcome Jeffrey and Mickey as our new sidekicks here.
Thank you.
We certainly hope you enjoy the chance to create the community, if so be it, and hope you enjoy your time on the commission as much as I have. I'm rather new myself. One of the first things we need to do is swear at the new commissioners and get them official. Who's going to perform that service? Do we?
I will.
You will.
Yeah.
Oh, are you an attorney too?
No, that's why we like her.
No.
This must be okay then.
Really? I have no authority, pretty much, no.
No.
So,
New and reappointed.
Oh yeah, new Andrea.
New and reappointed.
Oh, new and reappointed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we're all going to stand up just about.
Mr. Moss, Richard Johnson, Jerry Brentnall, and
Oh.
Mr. Gray.
Okay, you guys.
Stand up. And this is the oath of office. Please raise your right hand and repeat after me. And state your name where I leave it blank. I
Richard Johnson, do solemnly swear that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of California against all enemies, foreign and domestic, that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of California, that I will take this obligation freely without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion, and I will well and faithfully discharge the duties upon which I am about to enter.
I do too.
You do too? Thank you. Please sign up.
I'll report to Fort Bragg, South Carolina.
Thank you, Mr.
You're now in the Marines. Yeah.
That was easy.
Baghdad, here I come.
Okay. Well, we shouldn't take it lightly. I'm sorry. Welcome to all of you. The next item on our agenda is the election of officers. We need to elect a chairman, a vice chairman, and a secretary. Who would care to nominate a person or persons for chair?
Can we do them all together?
If you would prefer to do it that way, I would accept that.
Then I'll move that we appoint as the chair Gary Brenhall and all.
Actually, it's Ken Denio's turn.
Huh?
It's Ken Denio, I think,
I thought I read that.
is appropriate. I don't know whether that's,
Oh, I'm sorry. Ken Denio as the chair, Gary as vice chair, and Richard as the secretary.
okay, so that's the slate. Is there anyone else that would care to nominate any other people? Okay, the nominations are then closed. All those in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Opposed? So ordered. Thank you. Would you like to take over?
No, given that Ken isn't here, I'd ask, since you're sitting in the chair and we have a short agenda, just finish it.
Well, okay, if that's all
I
right
think
with
it
the
makes
rest
a
of
difference
us.
who chairs it.
I was hoping to take a little snooze. I've been looking forward to getting out of here for a long time. Okay,
We need to keep you involved here.
with that, we'll ask for a report from the planning director, please.
Good morning. Welcome, Paul Thompson, on behalf of Michael Johnson, sitting in on his behalf. To go over the board meeting, February 24th, the CEO staff presented a proposal to address the anticipated $18.5 million shortfall for the fiscal year of 2009-2010. It included use of, to make up that shortfall, use of $4 million in reserve funds. It included a package for management and confidential employees, which would propose a no layoff scenario, and the group would be required to take 12 mandatory days off during that time frame. There would be a cap of a 2.5% COLA, and there would be elimination of cash out of vacation leave. The board directed the CEO staff to work with the union to see if there's a similar no layoff package that could be put together by the union employees. Workload, they also indicated workload is down in the land development departments, and therefore the board directed that CEO pursue opportunities to reassign Cedro employees to non-general fund departments such as Public Works and Facility Services. The agreement with the union must be reached within a 2 to 3 week time frame, or alternative solutions would need to be pursued to address the budget shortfall.
Also include the planning commission only meeting once every 2 months?
I think as a matter of the way things are happening, it's about once a month. Right now, it doesn't look like we're going to have the first meeting in March. So the next one will be March 26th, and I'll go over that here in a second. Also, at the February 24th board hearing, the board adopted an ordinance approving a boundary line adjustment between Placer and Yuba County, which would transfer real property from Placer County to Yuba County. Your commission reviewed that. Also, the Hilt variance, that was the third-party appeal up in Forest Hill. I'm sure you remember that project. The board denied the third-party appeal and approved the variance to allow the 30-foot setback where a 50-foot setback from edge of easement would normally be required, and which would allow the existing residents to remain at that location and in compliance with the county code. As I indicated, don't have enough items for the March 12th Planning Commission, so the next meeting will be on March 26th. And it looks like that agenda that's being put together right now, we're going to have an extension of time for a temporary storage yard. This is up in the Cisco Grove area. It's for a temporary use permit, and it involves for a resurfacing project along Interstate 80. Also associated with that same project, there's an extension of time for a temporary batch plant that's up in that area as well. And lastly, there's a request for a conditional use permit modification for Squaw Valley Academy. Your commission approved a addition to the Squaw Valley Academy some time ago. They're now proposing some changes to that use permit, some building locations, increases in square footage, so that's going to be before your commission. Lastly, I'm not sure if this will be on the 26th, but it appears that the Placer County housing element is close to being approved by HCD. Therefore, that element will be back in front of your commission for final consideration, and then a recommendation to the Board of Supervisors for final approval of that element. So with that,
Say, Paul,
yeah.
is there any indication, sounded like a while ago that the Ophir batch plant was going to be on the 26th. Is that,
The Livingston,
Livingston, yeah.
no, I believe that one's been moved. When is that, Kathy?
April 23rd.
Looks like right now, April 23rd.
Okay, thank you.
April 23rd?
April 23rd.
No. I thought the April meeting would be that should have been the 23rd, I guess.
Well, we will have April 29th.
Oh, there's 5 Thursdays. You see, it's a trick question. Thanks, Paul.
Also, relating to today's agenda, at the Planning Commission's pleasure, I would like to suggest to move the trails update to after the Wattle Ranch 1015 item. Will allow the commission more opportunity to discuss that item. So at your pleasure,
Okay.
that's what I would suggest. And then I'd like to introduce Jill Paul. She will be going over the appointment for the wastewater committee for the planning commissioners. Since Larry Farina was on that appointment, there is now a need for the commission to reappoint somebody to that committee. So if you don't have any questions.
Any questions you didn't hear the answers to? Okay, thank you, Paul.
Alrighty.
Morning.
Good morning, Commissioners. Jill Paul, the Director of Environmental Health, and we're here to fill that meeting void that you're having by hopefully one of you is showing an interest in serving on our Wastewater Advisory Committee. The committee meets once a month on the first Tuesdays of the month, 4:30 to about 6. We're currently having a very active meeting schedule as that we're reviewing and updating the sewage ordinance and the related sewage manual. The committee's purpose is to make recommendations to the Environmental Health Director regarding all things sewage, really. The ordinance, manual, if there's other programmatic changes, anything that may be proposed out there. We use the Wastewater Advisory Committee as our sounding board to get a full view of the impacts of any changes. We have 13 members, and it's quite a varied representation. We have a group member appointment from Pages, academia, the Association of Realtors, Facility Services, a seepage pumper, Septic Tank Manufacturers Association, Building Industry, On-Site Sewage Environmental Consultant, On-Site Sewage Disposal Consultant, Contractors and Installers Association, and there's also a member at large and a Planning Commission member, which we're looking at today. So I do have applications for whoever might show interest. We'll bring you up to speed. Of course, we've gotten about halfway through our goal with the ordinance and the manual, and so we would need to spend a little time with you to kind of bring you up to speed on that. But it's a good working group, and we look forward to having one of you serve on our committee.
You meet here, do you? Where do you?
We meet here, actually, in the other room.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'll turn to my esteemed colleagues and see if there's a volunteer. Would any of you, would you like to, no? Anyone over this way?
I'll make a motion that we appoint Ken Denial. Isn't that the way we do it?
That'll teach you to listen.
Yeah.
I obviously haven't made this sound exciting enough, so.
I think part of it is we serve on other committees. I'm on the solid waste task force, and it's interesting. I enjoy those meetings.
Are you at all interested in this wastewater thing?
At the moment, not. I'm on the committee too. I'm the Pasco County Tourism Bureau board.
Mickey, would you be interested in it at all, or?
I'm going to have to take a little bit of a thought about it first.
Okay. Well, why don't we go ahead then, since you made the motion, and appoint Ken, and then if he refuses or doesn't want to do it, we'll fall back.
And Jeff seconded it.
And Jeff seconded it? Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So Ken Denial's your man. You'll be happy to hear about this when he comes home.
We did promise to take care of them all.
Yeah. You'll figure out who made the motion to approve it, too. You're
You're in trouble here.
Harry, you're going to be bad trouble. Okay, if that concludes the elections of officers and the report from the planning director, that would then take us to public comment. Is there anyone in the audience that would care to comment to the planning commission on anything other than items on the agenda? Seeing no one, thank you. We'll move on then to our 10:15 item, which is a conditional use permit for the Waddell Ranch Preserve Public Access Development, and it's categorically exempt, minor alterations to the land. Who's going to be, Paul? Oh, I'm sorry.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Vic Trefero with the Planning Department. The item today involves a conditional use permit to allow temporary public access and recreational use of the Waddell Ranch property, while a master plan would be prepared for long-term recreational use. Just to give you a little bit of background on the project, Waddell Ranch was recently added as an open space preserve as part of the Placer Legacy Program, and was recently purchased by the Truckee Donner Land Trust for both open space purposes and passive recreational use. See from the vicinity map, the 1,481-acre property is located off of Highway 267. approximately 3 miles east of Airport Road in the Truckee area. As far as zoning goes, there's 4 zones: forestry, residential multifamily, residential single-family, and open space. Here's the aerial map showing basically the surrounding of the Truckee Tahoe Airport to the west. Also, Martis Creek and Martis Creek Lake are located to the west, and Dry Lake is located on the property as well. Here's the site plan. I don't know if you could see the boundaries in light green there. It shows that basically the property falls within both Nevada County and Placer County covering the southern half. There's 2 access points proposed from existing roads in Nevada County. Martis Dam Road, which comes off of Highway 267 to the west. And also there's a private gated road known as the Strand, which comes across from the northern boundary. Also, the site plan shows there is a proposed campground, a reservation-only campground, but that's in the Nevada County jurisdiction. Here's some photos of the property showing a view towards Martis Lake. And here's some more shots of Martis Dam Road, which is one of the accesses I just mentioned. And here's a photo of the current Placer County gate off of Highway 267, which will remain closed. There won't be any access allowed off of that, their entrance. In terms of issues, zoning consistency, the proposed use is not allowed under current zoning, but it is allowed under the temporary uses and events section of the zoning ordinance. Since the proposed use it will be considered temporary, it would only be permitted for a 2-year period while the master plan is prepared for long-term use. In terms of compatibility, there's no major physical development proposed in Placer County. The only development, like I mentioned before, is a reservation-only campground in Nevada County, and there is actually a new trail proposed, but it's on U.S. Army Corps property outside of Wattle Ranch. The surrounding area is undeveloped, and there's no residential uses. So based on relatively low intensity of the recreational uses proposed, the project would be compatible with surrounding land uses. In terms of public comments, we actually did receive a letter just this morning from Dennis Zerbel. He raised a few points. One was on the group campground, and I informed him that that's actually on the Nevada County side, so no camping is proposed in our jurisdiction. As far as trails, he's concerned about trails crossing over adjacent property. These are all also on the Nevada County side, with the exception of the trail proposed on the Army Corps property. Also, he was concerned about a lack of signage indicating private property to restrict usage. The planning department does have a condition that we could add, but I would like the applicant to discuss this issue first, since they may have already some signage proposed. Other questions were regarding access allowed via the Strand. This road is in Nevada County's, again, it's in Nevada County's jurisdiction, so this needs to be issued, this issue needs to be brought up with Nevada County. And the other question was whether motorized vehicles will be allowed. Condition 1 of our staff report prohibits any use of motor vehicles on the property. So with that, staff recommends that the Planning Commission approve the conditional use permit for the project based upon the findings in the staff report and the recommended conditions of approval. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions? Looks like you did a good job.
Thanks.
Would the applicant care to come forward and speak to the commission?
Good morning, gentlemen. I'm Perry Norris, the Executive Director of the Truckee Donner Land Trust. My colleague, John Svan, just went out to fetch a sign that we wanted to show to you in a few moments. Just a little bit of background. Wattle Ranch was acquired in October of 2007, of which Placer County was a key player. This was one of the most expensive and complicated acquisitions to happen in the Sierra Nevada in quite some time, with a price tag of $23.5 million. Placer County contributed $10 million towards the acquisition, stemming mostly from open space mitigation fees that they exacted from other developments happening in the Martis Valley. Additionally, the Wildlife Conservation Board put in $6.5 million. The Truckee Tahoe Airport put in $3 million, and the State Resources Agency put in another $2 million, and we basically fundraised from private individuals the balance of the $23.5 million, as well as an additional $250,000 that the Land Trust now has for stewardship management and basically some restoration efforts on the property. A couple points I'd want to make is that in the discussions around Wattle Ranch, the state very much viewed Wattle Ranch as a wildlife preserve, and with kind of the displacement and development in the Martis Valley, the Loyalton Truckee deer herd have actually kind of been moving over and using Wattle Ranch as winter forage ground and not just as it was formerly just summer forage ground. On the other hand, Placer County very much looked at it as a park similar to other parks that you're developing and have created down here on the western slope of the valley. And there was a lot of negotiation on exactly what the conservation easement that is the county now holds on the property was going to allow and not allow. I should add that it was the Board of Supervisors of Placer County that were the most adamant about the creation of a campground. My organization really didn't have any strong interest in getting into the campground business, as well as there's a very good campground, 25 units, on the Army Corps property called the Alpine Campground. Wattle Ranch has been it's been a really long haul, and I think that it was kind of after approximately 7 years of litigation and contentious battles between the county, developers, and environmental groups, the resolution was, let's protect the most biologically important resource in the Martis Valley, of which was Wattle Ranch. And I'm pleased to say that there was a great kind of, as I say, peace in the valley that came together there was enormous support from the development community, including D&B Highlands and East West, who actually advanced some of their open space fees to make this acquisition possible, as well as the county, and with full support from the environmental community on this purchase. I'll turn it over to John just to talk a little bit about our plans on the property, but I should just mention two other things that you should be aware of. One is the Land Trust will be conveying this property to the Truckee Tahoe Airport District in fee in the coming weeks, and that is per their contribution of $3 million was actually done in the arrangement of a purchase and sale agreement, of which we're compelled, legally binding compelled, to convey that property. They are prepared and have budgeted $850,000 to be spent in their fiscal year this year towards forestry management and restoration. Additionally, as a result of some fines that East West received at North Star, Lahontan Regional Water Quality is going to use approximately $1.3 million of that fine towards watershed restoration and enhancement on Wattle Ranch. So I think it suffices to say that this 1,482-acre property is probably going to be one of the most cared for and an example of forestry and restoration management in the Sierra Nevada. John?
Good morning. My name is John Svan, and I'm the Stewardship Director at the Truckee Donner Land Trust. Would it be possible to get that aerial map of Wattle Ranch up? Thanks. So we're applying for the conditional use permit to be able to get out there and put some of the facilities and improvements in quickly. It will help us manage public access a little bit better and provide some amenities as well. And I'm confident that we can meet the staff's conditions to do this, and we've been working very closely with them, and thank you.
Oh, better yet.
A couple of things we would like to do quickly, as mentioned, are we're working closely with the Army Corps of Engineers to get this access trail completed into Wattle Ranch.
Excuse me, sir. You're going to need to come back to the we got to get this on the record.
Oh, sorry.
Also, there's a thing that,
There's I think there may be a laser pointer on the clicker right there.
Have to work.
aim it at it, it's a pointer.
Whoop.
Just,
Gotcha. Okay, thank you. This trail right here, we're temporarily calling it our Southwest Access Trail into Wattle Ranch Preserve. We're pretty excited about this trail for two reasons. The first reason is that it will be a really nice gateway into the property across Martis Valley and kind of showcase Wattle Ranch from afar and then bring you to it. And then also this was that gate that was in a different slide that we are not going to use as public access to the property. So this is already a very heavily used trailhead for this road is plowed in the winter, but it's gated so people like to walk on it, and it's also access for other trails. So we thought that would be the best spot to put this trail in.
Is there parking down there somewhere, John?
There is. We would like to improve it to make it a little bit nicer. Right here, this road is open, I think, on March 1st, March through November. And right there, we also, last year, did some improvements to a parking lot to allow for what we're temporarily calling our Northwest Access Trail across Martis Dam into the property. We also looked at this spot right here to put a small picnic area, but have some picnic benches so people could stop and enjoy the area. There's a meadow and upland sagebrush open area in the middle of the forest right there. And then we also plan to build this just a hiking and walking trail that will be open to foot travel and bicycle travel, and it just offers a really nice scenic tour of that property. There's some sugar pines there and some views of Truckee as well.
John, the gate down on 267, right. Now, below that is a trail right across the road there. Is that going to be are we going to put a pedestrian crossing there, or what's the outcome of that?
In the town of Truckee Trails and Bikeways master plan that they adopted, there are connections further out for something like that, but currently it's in the wouldn't it be neat if we could do that stage. The Army Corps is also looking at using this undercrossing maybe as a potential trail connection, so you wouldn't have to go across the highway.
Get your feet a little wet. Okay, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Go ahead.
I just wanted to mention also that that we've done some fuel treatment to promote forest health and fire safety up in this area. And in conclusion, also just in response to the letter that was sent to you, we have come up with a signage plan for Wattle Ranch Preserve, which includes, well, we're still working on it, but it will include location of signs and types of signs. And what we came up with was kind of in the spirit, if you've been into Yosemite Valley, they have signs like this that are metal and are allowed to rust over time, which provide information without really jumping out. And we do have some that's, I don't know if you can see this, but it says private property ahead, and those are some of the first ones we plan on putting in right away.
Doesn't have any bullet holes in it yet.
Can't be a real sign.
Thanks, and if you have any questions.
Yeah.
Richard has a question for you here.
MC, maybe, I know it's in Nevada County, but Maybe you could explain what the Strand is to us? Was it a subdivision or what?
The Strand is, the road the Strand is accessed through the Glenshire, Devonshire neighborhood, and then it has a gate across it and turns into a private gated community, I believe called Juniper Hills. And there's large acre home sites up there.
Okay. Let's see, another question. You were mentioning that Placer County holds a conservation easement on the whole property or just a part in Placer County?
The easement is on the entire, including the Nevada side of the property. And Placer County is the grantee of that easement. Truckee Donner Land Trust right now is the grantor. Once we convey it to the property in fee to the airport, then the easement will switch from Placer County to the land trust, and we will be responsible for monitoring and enforcing the easement.
Okay. So basically Nevada County, as far as approval of any projects, that's what their involvement is or has been or will be?
They haven't. We've been keeping them in the loop through the, Supervisor Ted Owens, and so far they haven't made any kind of regulatory requirements of us as yet. I think once we start constructing campgrounds and things like that, I think then they'll probably pay a little closer attention.
And so those plans are what we're waiting for in the next couple of years is a master plan? Okay.
Yes, we'd like to do some of the improvements before the master plan is done in Nevada County, but that's all going to be outlined in the master plan.
So you'll be back to Placer County in 2 years then? Is that what, I guess our plan is right now with...
That is our understanding.
And so we'll be looking at the master plan at that time. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions, Mick, or down this way? No? I guess not. Thank you. Anyone else in the audience care to comment on this item?
Hi, my name is Mike Dreyfus. I actually live on the Strand. How do we make this work? Basically at the tip of Dry Lake, next to the Zerbals that sent you guys their letter. First off, I want to say that we're thrilled with the Conservancy getting the land, obviously, being right. All of that being what it's going to be forever. Our major concern is that this is very complicated, and we have a very, very delicate environmental area in Dry Lake, which is a magnet, and is what all these trails lead to and all this access leads to. And our primary concern is that there is no plan, and that we're about to open up access to this land with no plan, and it's an urban access because there's a huge development in North Star. And there's going to be people that aren't used to being in these areas that are going to be getting on these trailheads and going out and affecting this area. And to allow this access without some sort of even preliminary plan is dangerous. There are all kinds of issues. There's safety issues. There's policing issues. There's conservation issues. There's where people are going to go, how they're going to get back, who's going to watch them. And none of these have been answered. I received a notice that is very, very vague on what's going on. It just says access. So I have great trepidation about allowing something like this before it's been at least something outlined and some sort of preliminary planning on what's going to go on and how things are going to occur. Obviously, secondarily, we are concerned with access to our property. The bullet hole reference was not really that appreciated by me.
You know what I meant.
Yeah. A sign that says private property ahead, I don't know if that's come on or go away or what that means, but those are issues as well. And it's about 3 miles when you look from where North Star is to Dry Lake. It's a bit of a way. It's a good day hike. I think you'd get most people that are not going to be messing around, that are really on a serious hike. You start to add bikes to the equation, that kind of changes things quickly. I'm telling you, if you go out there, it's one of the most beautiful, beautiful marshes you've ever seen. It is full of wildlife and birds and animals that are drinking from there. And it's obviously a little slice of private heaven for us. I want to share it, but I don't want to see it ruined. So I would just, I guess, summing it up, and I know the Zerbals feel the same way, we'd just like to see something that's a little bit more concrete than just opening the gates. And again, particularly because you really there's a Ritz-Carlton being built, guys, right there. You know, there are a lot of people that are coming to vacation and they're going to be sent to that spot and told to take a little day hike. So before you swing the doors open, you got to figure out what's going on. Plus, we got Nevada County involved, what's going on there. Plus, I hear quite a conflict between conservation easement and campgrounds, you know, and that's got to be worked out. So it's a complicated thing, and to swing the doors open too quickly, we have concerns with.
Okay.
Is this an existing trail that, I guess maybe I should have asked the previous people.
There are existing logging roads all through there. I've walked very easily. It's almost sort of a natural walk to go from that white line trail is a very natural walk. You start on it and you will go the right direction.
So most people will confine themselves to that existing route?
Yeah, except for the fact, you know, the plan that they have to draw people on the other loop, quite frankly, I've never walked back to the other loop. But I think that's fairly in existence already. Yeah, those are pretty natural routes. There's all kinds of roads going off of it. The bikers will go. The serious bikers will go wherever they want to go. And there's all kinds of, I guess you'd call them illegal trails, you know, that people have already made back there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I guess what I'm wondering is if you have open ground and everybody knows that this is a trust, you know, kind of a semi-public ground, and it sounds like there's quite a bit of public ground adjacent or in the area too, managed by other agencies. I guess what I'm questioning is if you acknowledge that there's some use going out there versus ignoring it while they do a more detailed plan and get things together. I guess that's what I'll be weighing at any rate, is whether, you know, whether to acknowledge what's going on now and recognize that there's existing trails.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying.
Or not, just
yeah.
pretend it's not happening.
It makes sense, but again, once you start putting signs up and paving parking lots, you're inviting a whole different use. And if that's what you're going to do on a preliminary, if you're just going to say, hey, there's access, which there is now, there's access. Local people know there's access. People know there's access. If you're going to start to declare there's access, then you got to be prepared for that access. You know, Dry Lake, we pulled people out of there during the winter when they go on with their dogs and fall in. You know, how are you going to take care of that? I mean, no, it's not everybody's responsibility, but there's a lot of dangers and a lot of issues of how you handle people. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe all these people from North Star don't come down and do their day hikes and show up there. But what if they do? And are we prepared for that? And I don't think we're prepared for that. And particularly, I think it's a violation of conservation easement. There's been no EIR I've ever seen, no environmental impact report on what this all means. And none of this stuff's out there. So access is already there, I think. But what we're talking about now is making it formal before we have any plans.
Okay, thank you.
Hey, thanks, Mike. Anyone else care to comment? Okay, we'll close off and bring it back to the applicant for final summation.
Just a couple of points. One is in regards to an EIR, Placer and Nevada County granted a categorical exemption to CEQA on this property. In regards to the conflict of the campground and the conservation easement, the easement specifically allows the construction of a reservation-only campground, and this was a long negotiation kind of between the Land Trust, Wildlife Conservation Board, and the county. This property has had a long history of historical use that technically was a trespassing violation, and that the property was closed while it was owned by the Pritzker family, whom we purchased it from, and it was no one was allowed on the property during that time. We have encouraged public use, I think, at the wishes of Placer County, and we've been working with the county all along. And I also would take exception to the fact that there is no plan. There's been a lot of thought given in. For instance, closing the access off of 267 was directly a result of cars come down that hill very fast from North Star, and we thought it presented an issue of public safety. I think adding additional signs like that will keep people from on the trails, or will keep them from getting lost. We're also going to be adding interpretive signages and talking about the resource values and letting people learn just kind of how special and how sensitive and fragile this area is. I think at this point, after 3 years of effort by the Land Trust, by the Trust for Public Land, and by several government entities to deny the public access to this property, and the majority of the $23.5 million that went into this acquisition were public dollars, it's just unconscionable.
Harry, I have a
Question for you.
Yes.
A couple of us. Go ahead.
In the staff report, it talks about what we're being asked to grant is just a temporary use permit for
Yes,
2
sir.
years while a long-range master plan is prepared. And I understand some of the comments that Mike raises about safety, police, conservation. We all see that where there's public access to lands, and a lot of times it's misused. Is this master plan that you're contemplating and creating, would it address issues such as those raised by Mike Dreyfus a minute ago?
Yes, probably maybe not to satisfaction. The point is, clearly, this has been essential for a handful of winning property owners, their private park. And the other side to this is what the family we purchased Wattle Ranch from had plans to ring subdivisions around Dry Lake. Now, this may not be the absolute best outcome, but I can tell you that this was a conservation victory for the Sierra Nevada. And to paint it as anything less, like this is suddenly going to degrade the property, I just don't think is true. And that if this property wasn't acquired for conservation, it has entitlements for up to 1,200 residences. And we know for a fact that DMB Highlands and East West Partners both looked at this property, and they had plans in the neighborhood of 400 to 600 units if they were to purchase it. And Dry Lake, which is Mr. Dreyfus referred to as his precious gem, the tentative maps that I actually saw had it ringed with subdivisions. And the impacts from that sort of development would have been terrible to that preserve.
Are you intending to put up any signage to encourage people to stay out of that Dry Lake area so they don't get...
No, I think Dry Lake is kind of a centerpiece destination for the public that wants to enjoy this property and enjoy the Martis Valley.
Well, I don't mean that they shouldn't go see it. I'm just saying don't walk out in the middle of it.
Yes,
in
yes.
the spring or the winter
There will be
or whatever.
signage put there this summer that will talk about the resource values. Please stay off the wetlands and things like that. It's actually, interestingly enough, the neighbors that have been, used Dry Lake for kayaking, boating, and other things that the public aren't allowed to do.
Okay. Any other questions?
Okay, I guess maybe to carry on one step, and I guess what I'm hearing from you is you're not going to pace the country with signs. It's mainly just informational signage where needed.
Yeah, as I said, at the trailheads there will be kiosks, and there will probably be 2 kiosks at each trailhead, at Swat and Watt, as John pointed out, and then there will be directional signage at key intersections. And these logging roads that over the year have turned into really nice earthen trails, if you will. And they're very, very popular with mountain bikers in the area. So we have 2 access points basically coming in. We don't consider the Strand because it is a gated road and the public's not allowed on that road. We don't consider that an access point except for the folks from Juniper Hill subdivision to come down and enjoy the property. But currently our northern access point will have signage just directing people to keep them on the trails. There are some what we call pirated or illegal trails that merge with other trails, and we just want to keep people on the correct path. And then as we said, I mean, one of the most obvious ways that a public would enjoy this is to do a trail around Dry Lake and a nice border, and you could certainly build one that is environmentally sensitive. Out of respect for those neighbors, we're not building that trail. And that's where that sign says approaching private property. That is to discourage people. This is kind of the end of it, turn around at that point. So we feel that we've been very good neighbors. We've been receptive to the neighbors. We've met with Mr. Dreyfus before. We've met with Dennis. Matter of fact, I had a conversation with Mr. Zerbel yesterday trying to explain exactly the history of the campground, how it came about, its location, and how it will be managed. So, You know, I should also say that the Land Trust owns in fee over 5,000 acres in Placer, Nevada, and Sierra County. And we've never had a single objection from a neighbor during that time.
Now, I guess I'm a little bit confused on the campground. The temporary use permit that you're looking for now, does that include the construction of a campground? Or will that be in the master plan?
It would be in Nevada County. And we at this time, there has been no demand for use of the campground. We haven't had any Boy Scout troops say, geez, we'd like to come out and camp on Wattle Ranch. And our plans are not to build, construct a campground until we get some sense of that demand. We'd rather not build something, create something, spend money on something that we think, and we're pretty sure it's going to go unused, quite frankly, because there is as I mentioned earlier, a very nice campground right over, zap it, will you? On the Army Corps property. It's the Alpine Campground with 25 units.
Okay. I guess what I'm trying to get to is, you know, when we talk about a master plan in a couple of years, and of course the campground is in Nevada County, so that's probably an issue for Nevada County to really deal with, but when it comes up. But I guess what I'm hearing with the temporary use permit that you're asking for today, that you really just want to acknowledge the public use of this land on the existing trail systems?
Correct.
And the existing use that occurs now with some informational and directive signs that helps the public along their way in the property.
We think that we will improve the public safety and we will enhance the public's enjoyment of this property through signage and even some trail, improving the trails and some small developments such as that.
Are you going to build new trails?
We do have plans for a new trail, as John pointed out, and that is on the Army Corps of Engineers property.
And so that would be their jurisdiction then, and not,
that would be on their jurisdiction.
Not an issue before us today then.
Not for you. And then there is as John pointed out, what we're calling that loop trail that goes up onto one of the high points on the property, and it affords really wonderful views of the Martis Valley all the way to Truckee, as well as to the Pacific Crest and Mount Lowland.
And again, that would be Nevada County.
That'd be Nevada County.
Part of their temporary use permit.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, one more question. The existing use sounds like it's primarily mountain bikers and hikers.
Correct.
So, you know, given that you have a temporary use permit, what about if OHVs show up?
Toyota dealer, you know, right here.
The property is posted with no motorized vehicles. There have been some illegal snowmobile use on that. We've actually worked with Nevada County, who has put a sheriff out on a couple of weekends to try and educate the public that there's not snowmobiling allowed. And occasionally there's kids from the Glenshire subdivision, which is one of the largest full-time resident subdivisions in Truckee, that kids do cross onto it on motorbikes. Our plan also is to either hire or find a volunteer, for lack of a better word, a park ranger, and we'd like to start collecting some data this summer over who the user groups and the demographics of our user groups and the number of folks that are out there, as well as, you know, help direct the public and provide education to the public.
Okay, so the enforcement of OHV use is just the property owner's right?
Yes.
Now? Okay, so it really doesn't have anything to do with us and our approval of the temporary use permit?
No. I should defer to staff on your staff, actually. On
Yeah,
that one.
just a clarification on that. Condition number 1 does say no recreational motorized vehicles for this.
Okay, so it is part
temporary
of our
use.
decision.
So it is a condition of approval.
Is there a time frame for these signs going up?
You'd have to ask them.
There's already temporary signs that we installed last summer that are on the property, and and then they will be replaced. We hope to have that completed, our signage plan fully implemented by the end of this summer. And as John showed you, they're very sturdy, stout, and quite expensive signs that we'll be installing.
That all you got, Jeff? Yeah. Okay. Anybody else down here have questions? Harry, Mickey? Nobody? Thank you, guys. All right. Well,
Let me see it.
we don't typically do that.
Yeah. I have one more question.
What I said, I believe.
I have a question here that I want to clarify. What
The applicant or from the staff?
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 Yeah, what provision in the conditional use permit was that referred to OHV?
That's condition one,
Condition one, says no motorized vehicles.
or equestrian uses will be allowed.
So just two simple things that were said that I did not say. One, we're thrilled with the whole thing. I know what it could have been. I want public use. We'd like to see it. Two, we spoke 8 months ago, maybe? Was that it? Haven't spoke since. Nobody called me about this. I'm learning as much as you guys are sitting here looking at this, which begs the question of what's the plan? What is the plan? I see signs, I see this. I just want to know what's going to happen. And that's why I'm here, to comment on what I know that's going to happen, and I don't know what's going to happen. And so some communication between us would be good. You know where to find me, correct? I never got a phone call about this meeting. I just got something that was sent to where I get my tax bill.
I don't know.
Thanks.
Is there a reason why the equestrian thing was left, no horses? Was there some, why was that included? It's kind of, I don't think there's a big
I can
equestrian
begin
here.
to answer that in part because there's no provision for parking at this time. There's no formal parking areas being added. There is an existing parking area that's gravelled off of Martis Dam Road, and they're going to do some minor improvements, some barriers to keep vehicles in place and not, further disturb soil, some fiber rolls for water quality. But that parking is just for visitors, and it wouldn't really serve for the large trailers for horses.
Okay. All right, go ahead.
The equestrian use is addressed in the conservation easement, and the thought of why it's not currently allowed was horses and equestrian use is not allowed on the adjacent 2,200-acre Army Corps property, but the easement specifically says that if we are successful in gaining public access and a conservation easement on the adjoining Sierra Pacific Industries property, which is over 8,000 acres, that horses would then be allowed, and would need to kind of revisit that in terms of a master plan of the Sierra Pacific Industry property and Wattle Ranch. So it does in the future that should this preserve suddenly increase from 1,482 acres to 8,000 or 9,000 acres, then we will revisit the equestrian use.
Well, Perry, does it make sense then for us to take that limitation out of our temporary use permit to give you the flexibility as you go forward with your master plan to include that or accommodate that use? This looks like an unnecessary limitation to me.
The use permit's good for 2 years, and then after that, it'll expire. So presumably by then, they can come in with a new master plan, and we can,
Yeah,
there'll
but
be
these-
new conditions there.
These comments have a funny way of becoming permanent. So I'd rather give them the most flexibility possible as opposed to limiting them.
Well, we'd appreciate the flexibility. Just in terms of a timing, I don't see that there's going to be any kind of resolution or acquisition or even a conservation placed on the Sierra Pacific Industries property for at least 4 to 5 years at this point. That's a long ways out for us.
Okay, thank you, Perry. All right, any other quick questions? Seeing none, what's your pleasure?
Well, if there's no discussion, it looks to me like it's a good use, and the time for Mr. Dreyfus's conditions to be addressed or as they develop the master plan. So if there's no disagreement or discussion, I'll recommend that the Planning Commission approve the temporary conditional use permit for the Wattle Ranch Preserve based on the findings in our staff report and subject to the recommended conditions of approval that are attached to the staff report with one change. And that is in condition number 1. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5th line down, it says, or equestrian uses. My motion proposes that we strike those 3 words.
Okay, is there a second? We have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So ordered. Thank you for your time and your comments. If anyone would choose to appeal, I guess, you have to go to the planning department and $495, and you have 10 days to do it. Thank you all for your time, and comments. And I guess if there's nothing more to be brought before the planning commission this wonderful day. Oh, the trails discussion. I'm sorry, we moved that back. We'll move now to item D, which we will be talking about. And the guy that brought it up got up and left.
Did you want to take a break?
Mr. Brentonall. You'll be right back, I'm sure.
Can we take 5 to get a cup of coffee?
Yeah, we'll give you, can we take him a minute break here? I'll get something.
Yeah. I went to that here, I sat there and watched it.
Forest Service property? Christopher, are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay, if we get these guys to listen, well, we'll be in business. I'm not going to get into that fight. I know her, too.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. Christopher Schmidt from the Planning Department. I've been asked today to give you a brief update on our looking into trails policies, particularly where and when we require trails. Trails have been a hot-button issue at the Commission for some time, particularly as trail demand increases. You've heard about trails and how public access along these trails can be controversial at your earlier item. Our focus in our policy reporting has been on trails, not particularly bikeways. Trails are typically your Class 1 trail, which is physically separated from the road. Your bikeways, the policies for bikeways are pretty clear-cut. So our focus has been on the trails. Most of the controversy before the Commission has usually been in the Granite Bay or the Penryn, Horseshoe Bar Penryn areas, but we've been looking at trails policies countywide. And some of the major issues we've come across are sometimes competing with each other. There's an increasing public demand. For some people, there's never enough or there's no standard of enough trails. They say get them everywhere you can get them. Long-range planning, we should be getting them where they make sense. According to a plan, also get them while we can get them, because once a project comes before the Commission or the county for approvals, that may be a lost opportunity if we don't require them at that time. Fiscal realities, trails are expensive to build. They're also expensive to maintain and operate. And as everyone knows that reads newspapers, there's not a lot of money out there for these type of facilities. And lastly, and almost most importantly, there's legal constraints that dictate where and when we can require trails on projects. So, like I said, how we obtain trails have limitations. We're guided by the Subdivision Map Act that allows us to require or condition projects to provide easements or actually construction of trails. And there's thresholds or limits of how far we can go due to previous case law, particularly Nolan and Dolan, that says the requirement or the conditions have to have a nexus, so there has to be a connection to the project, and it has to be proportional to that impact. So in summary, I'll just give you an update of what the current trail policy is, and it's not black and white, but it is quite clear. On parcel maps and use permits, if an adopted community plan trail map shows a trail alignment on or fronting the project site, the county has the authority to require the trail facility. Otherwise, there must be concrete proof of a nexus. And we'll talk about that if you want, about the nexus. We can request trail dedications on every project, but the applicant is not required to provide them, but we can certainly ask if it makes sense. Frontage improvements are another way we can get trails. If we put the trail through the right-of-way, the only caveat is that trail could go away if that road is expanded. We have greater leeway with specific plans and major subdivisions and rezonings. We have more leeway to require trails, not only easements, but also building and implementing that trail. In summary, this is just a status report. We're going to be back with you with a full report in 30 or 60 days. We'll discuss about what we found in the various community plans and general plans. Some of the focus has been that if we're being held to lines on a map, trails map in a community plan, it's important to note that of our 15 community plans, only 7 of them have trails maps. So it's a big issue. So if that is the guide that we have to use, many of our community plans don't provide us with that information. So it creates a lot of consternation. There's also a lot of discussion in the community plans it's very general. You'll hear language like connect residential to commercial areas, or development to employment centers, alternative modes of transportation, or access to schools and parks. So someone reading that could say you should get trails just about everywhere, and the legalities are that we cannot do that. So I think the next steps are going to be looking for direction from you of what kind of tools you need to implement a true, reasonable trails plan for the county. And we have John and Andy here from Parks, Rebecca here from Engineering Surveying, and the planning staff to help if you have any questions at this point. And keep in mind, we'll be back before you 60 days at the most with a full report.
Okay, questions?
Well, I'll kind of lead off because it seems like the idea of trails being expensive seems to be a major issue sometimes that gets in the way of real serious consideration of trails. And just kind of philosophically, being that I did work for the government, I understand how much of a barrier sometimes budgets are, but sometimes the lack of recognition of a trail or the need of a trail, you know, the people are going to use it that area anyway, and it's going to cause impacts as well as difficulties in the community. So I guess to me it's kind of a challenge to bite the bullet and say that this is a public benefit that we just have to somehow assume the cost that goes with it. So
Right.
I don't know, I guess I'm just having trouble when I hear that probably in a lot of public things that we can't afford it because we don't have the money. It seems like in the public arena that's, to me, not a real good answer all the time.
Right. I know there's the demand for trails by the public is increasing. City of Roseville has done a marvelous job with their trail system. I think people look to them with envy and are looking for the same type of facilities in Placer County. They are expensive, but once we lose that opportunity to provide trails, it could be gone forever. So we have to think long-term instead of the short-term of actually getting them built, but we need the right-of-way or the dedications of easements if we're going to implement them down the road.
Okay, maybe one more, then I'll turn it over to our most interested person here. But anyway, it seems like in the past, too, like I know in the Horseshoe Bar area, there was a lot of interest in the trail. And when we looked at it, it seemed like the right-of-way that the county already had was plenty if, you know, the money was there to build a trail. So the fact that location was included in the community plan wasn't an issue because opportunity was preserved there anyway. But it seemed like there was kind of a divergent point of view between maybe some of the departments where the people in the recreation end of the game work now, particularly in the newer plans, to at least conceptually identify trail locations. And at that point, they are conceptual, but
Right.
to go from that point, or at, you know, when the public comes forward at a planning commission meeting and indicates a need for a trail that's not on that plan, it seems like the other end of the county says, well, we can't look at it because it's not in the plan. And so the difference between the conceptual versus boiling it down to whether this is really a planned trail, I guess on that one, it seems to me that if there seems to be a real high public interest in looking at a trail location, that we need to recognize that the community plan is a broad plan, and that, you know, that doesn't, the fact it's not on that map doesn't necessarily exclude the consideration of this other possibility for a trail location. And I would guess without having to go through the whole community planning process just for one trail. But
Right. We're caught in a dilemma there because oftentimes it may make planning sense, it's logical, but it may not make fiscal sense, or it may not jive with our adopted plan. There's also the legal restraints. So it's an issue, and I think some of our documents aren't strong enough. So I think that's going to be a discussion for a future work program to get these documents acceptable. I don't know if it's updates to each community plan, adoption of a countywide trails master plan, a pedestrian master plan, or there's been talk of potentially like a Loomis Basin trails plan, because that seems to be where the big issue is. But those all cost money to prepare. A lot of the work can probably be done in-house, but it requires an environmental document. It could be a 2-year process. So it's going to be an issue before the commission.
Yeah, well, it brings us back to the money part of it, but, you know, there seems to be a strong public support,
Right.
citizen support, then, you know, the fact that it costs money shouldn't necessarily be the barrier.
Right. Yeah, I think most people like trails, except if you're a developer that has to give some of your land away or a trail's in your backyard. But generally, I think the public support for trails there, it's a great community amenity.
Yeah. Well, you know, in urban areas, developers have to give up easements for sidewalks and that type of thing too, for the pedestrians to be able to flow
Right.
through the community. So I understand for the developer's point of view, but then also, they're developing a community too, and it has to provide for the community to live there.
I agree.
Okay, I'll turn it over to.
Just a quick note. One other thing to consider as we've been discussing our ultimate full report is looking at, what do we need to do to make ourselves in a good position to look for like state and federal funds. There are grant monies out there that are currently available for the construction, at least, of trails. So we need to look at, what do our plans have to have so we're competitive in the field where we're going for state or federal monies, which might help. Now, we still have the maintenance issue there. So there's two, parts of the money issue where it's, okay, how do you construct and then how do you maintain? But, if we can figure out what we need to do to make ourselves competitive, that would be helpful.
Yeah. The maintenance issue, one of the things that, if people are using this route without maintenance, then the issues as far as erosion and those types of things happen. But if we do have a dedicated trail system that's adequately designed and hardened off, then theoretically, at any rate, the impacts that come off of the trail that's being used anyway, probably in trespass or whatever, are much less. And so, there's a balancing point on the maintenance question, too.
Yeah, that is very true.
Okay.
Jerry?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let me back up for purposes of Jeff and Mickey to explain to them what's going on here so that you can kind of get up to speed. For years, the issue of trails has been kind of the forgotten sister when projects and developments have come up. And fortunately, we've had folks like John Ramirez and Vance Kimbrell and others who have come to the rescue of some of these trails on some of the projects that we put in. But even they have been constrained. So I asked Michael Johnson, and the commission supported me, if we would take a look at this policy of trails. Where do they go? When do they get put in? And so forth. And Paul, if you'd pass along to him my appreciation for that effort. Chris and some of the others have done a wonderful job of trying to put their arms around this elephant, and it's a tough thing to describe. The general plan and the community plans all anticipated a relatively large trail network. And we look at other communities with, as Chris said, some degree of envy. Fortunately, they had leaders who had the foresight to see the need for trails and the benefit that trails could provide to a community. One of those leaders is sitting right here at our table, Harry Crabb at Roseville. They have a beautiful network of trails. And rather than being an imposition upon property, it's actually a benefit. And so the question becomes, how come it is every time a project comes up here, it's usually me that gets involved in saying, can we put a trail in along the road? And there are legal problems to requiring it, but often as not, as part of the negotiations, the developer was willing to grant a trail easement because it's a benefit to that development. The planners were kind of left in the lurch because they don't know when to request a trail and when not. And they look at the master trail plan that we have in this county, which is woefully inadequate. And they do what they can to get these trails in. So I asked Chris if he wouldn't take a look and see what our policies are. And you have them before you in the report. And it's time to take another look at the trail map. If that's what it's going to take to get everybody headed the same direction and singing from the same songbook, then let's take another look at the trail map. If it means we have to do an EIR and it's going to take 2 years, well, so be it. You have to start somewhere. Let's start that process. I'll defer to Karen and the legal office on what's going to absolutely be required. But there have developed over the years, and I speak from the Horseshoe Bar, Granite Bay area because that's what I'm most familiar with, but there have developed a series of trails, both official and unofficial, that people use to go from one place to another. If the representatives of the Loomis Basin Horsemen's Association were here, they would talk about a trail that's used. It's unofficial. It goes through PCWA property and along their canals from King Road down to the school at Placer. And it's a wonderful little cut through to save people from having to walk along some major thoroughfares. Unfortunately, that trail doesn't appear on any of the desired maps and so forth. And maybe it's time to take a look at that and to figure out how to put that on the we'd like to have it list. I don't purport to know where all the trails are that need to be, but I do know that from where I live, which is along Horseshoe Bar Road, I'd love to be able to ride my bicycle or even walk into the town of Loomis, which is only 4 miles away, but I don't dare walk down Horseshoe Bar Road. It's narrow, it's fast, it's dangerous.
You should reconsider that.
Thanks, Larry. So, but for the efforts of some valiant few who have gone forward, such as Vance, who've really been a great advocate for this cause, it's time to formalize this process, to come up with a trail plan that's been I want to say hacked on, meaning approved, looked at, commented on by the public at large and all those who have an interest, so that we can have something, master plan that we can look at, and that it doesn't always come down to a case-by-case basis, because not everything comes up to us. That's what we're trying to do, to formalize it. I'm envious of Roseville. I love the trails that run down along the American River down to Sacramento, and as you all know, if you use them, they're heavily used. The trails around Tahoe, very nice. And we're looking for the same type attributes throughout the southern part of Placer County. I realize there are fiscal constraints, and I'm just going to elect to ignore them. And the reason is the building of trails, the maintenance of trails will ebb and flow as monies are available. But what I'm looking for is preserving the right-of-way. If we don't at least do that, then we'll never be able to build them when we do have the money. And if the 4-H people were here, the Loomis Basin Horsemen's Group were here, they'd all be saying, yeah, and don't forget the fact that we volunteer. There are volunteers that go out and help maintain these trails, and I'm sure that John would recognize the invaluable service that they perform. Trailer Ranch is another example of maintenance of a county-owned facility by volunteers. So my request of my fellow commissioners and direction to the staff is, let's proceed to find out how we can best go about re-examining the master trails chart so that we can define the trails that we have, that we would like to have, and that would best serve the interests of the public at large, and then start imposing that upon the developments and things that come up. And I think you'll find that the idea that we have to require of developers the dedication of trails will be almost moot. As part of the negotiations and discussions that I've ever had with any of them, they've all been willing to give them up along a frontage. They didn't necessarily want to build them, but the right-of-way, yes, because it was such a benefit to them, their project, and the county at large.
Are you putting that in the form of a motion?
Yes, I will so move that that be our direction.
I'll second it. But further on, we have to develop some kind of a vehicle in which to pay for these things. I don't want to see them sit there for 20 years and nothing happens to them, because that doesn't make any sense either.
No, it
You have
doesn't.
to
but
develop that vehicle somewhere along the line.
It would be nice to have that vehicle
Whether
in
the big
place.
development fees or what, I don't have the answer to that.
Yeah, I'm thinking long-term, Harry, and the
Yeah.
project that comes to mind is Tykert Gravel over, I think it's Coon Creek in Lincoln. I don't think you were on the commission when that came through here, but, excuse me, part of the beauty of it is they have, 80 acres, Larry? I think it's quite a large parcel, and they're going to mine out their gravel. And I think it's for 60, 70, 80 years, something like that. At the end of this, the company is going to restore the land and make it into a park and give it to the county. And my vision is, well, that won't affect me, probably won't affect my children either. but my grandchildren will be affected by that, and I envision that from Roseville up to Marysville is probably just a solid sea of houses by that point. So having a park at that point would be a real plus. Similarly with these trails, it'd be nice to be able to build them, and I absolutely support your idea of seeing if we can come up with some sort of vehicle for fiscal constraints. But even if we don't, that's not going to stop my desire to at least define the requirement.
Paul, do you understand what his motion is? Are you satisfied with what the direction is? Sometimes it gets to be vague, and I don't want to be left.
I wouldn't mind just asking one point of clarification. As we have been discussing, and Chris and I have been working on this project, I assume that we may have a number of different mechanisms to achieve that and provide that back to the commission, that, here are a number of different options, and can I understand that that would be acceptable?
Oh, yeah, we're willing to consider options. We want really
With that
your help in
objective.
determining what's the best method to achieve what we see as a county objective, both legally, fiscally, and practically.
I think as we've gone through time, at least as I've gone through time, I think back in the 60s, I guess, when Granite Bay came in and a lot of that area.
I wasn't even born then.
And we did those community plans for Granite Bay and in those areas. Trails were a hot item then, and it was. And we put trails in almost every subdivision, as I think back in the early days. And then, for whatever reason, they fell out of vogue again, and they weren't quite as important for a while. And so we kind of forgot about them, and the trails were nothing more than just lines on paper, and a lot of people didn't bother to develop them. And now we've come at a full circle, and we're back again where people now are starting to realize there's more people, they need things to do, places to go, and recreation areas. And so I think now they realize that, as you've pointed out, they are important, and we need to try to find ways to perfect the creation of them, because I think if we do create them, they will get used. But if we don't have them, then I think those communities, it's really hard and almost impossible afterward to come back and try to do this. So once all those developments, particularly now that area we're moving out west of Roseville and north between Lincoln and Roseville, those areas, I think those are areas that we hadn't gotten to putting any lines on any papers yet. But now it's time to take a look at some of that. Okay. So you're satisfied. Does anyone else have any questions or comments, Mick?
I just want a question on clarification a little bit. So this report that you're going to bring forward in the next 60 days, that would include existing trails and their condition, and proposed trails, official and unofficial trails, basically is part of that report?
We can include that. There is an existing map that shows existing trails and the proposed trails, and also where we have the easements acquired to date.
And that's countywide? Because I'm not interested in community plan by community plan. I'm thinking of completely countywide.
I know it's complete for South Placer. I'm not sure if it's countywide.
It should be countywide, because where you live, you're up in Serene Lakes, right? That should be part of the trail, and I'm thinking of the Western States Trail and the things that are integral to this.
Trail, lots of trails.
It should be a benefit to everybody in the county, and I'm not actually proposing that they come back with the trail map when we start working on it. I'm asking you, what's the best vehicle to do that? Do we have to go through an EIR, or was the fact that this was considered as part of the EIRs for the community plans and the general plans sufficient? I don't know. Karen, you'll have to come up with an answer to that. Can we present this at community forums and let people mark it up as they see the trails, and then have discussions and eventually adopt it by the Board of Supervisors? What's the best vehicle to use here to start this process, to more formalize it from the rather informal setting that it exists today?
I do think that we could at least provide the information, though, what information do we have and where are we lacking that information, which might also tell us how to progress beyond the next report.
Okay, and the community, of course, wants to process the map. They want to comment on
Right.
it. They want to start drawing it up, and how do we get there?
Mickey's got a little different situation in Serene Lakes with concession of the cross-country ski area. A large percentage of his ski trails are on county-owned right-of-ways. And we give them, as I recall, we give them use permits for those uses. But in the summer months, maybe we ought to be looking at revising those so that the general public could be encouraged. I don't know. Whatever. I mean, that's
Yeah,
just a thought.
No, I'm convinced that the information from this report might lead to that kind of action, and I'm hoping that that's what
Yeah.
we hear.
Question,
Jeff?
do we have situations that already exist where planned trails have become impossible because we failed to get entitlements? We have trails that are going to permanently be going nowhere at this point, at least on paper?
Probably.
Can I answer for you?
Okay, so if the answer to that question is yes, then as we're doing this, are we going to have provisions to either fall back and regroup or just abandon that trail, or are we going to just keep our blinders on and have a trail that goes nowhere because we want a trail?
Well, in theory, and I know this is Jerry's, I'm going to answer for Jerry, is all those little segments will eventually piece together over time. Could be 10 years, could be 20 years, could be 50 years.
I think
So,
we need to look and see if there's truly a reasonable possibility of that happening in some of those areas. And if the answer is no, we need to put our resources into ones that really have a reality of happening.
oftentimes there are offers of dedication, so we get that, but we don't exercise them. So they're not even, they're lines on us, but they're not county-owned.
The way that I draw a simile to it is, it's like a checkerboard, and all the red squares have trails, and the black ones don't. And how do we start connecting up the red boxes to each other? And the good example of this is on King Road. You're familiar with King Road. Halfway down, if you come down Auburn Folsom and turn right, there's a new subdivision there called, I think, Cannonshire or something to that effect. And we required them to put in a trail, and it's offset from the road, and it's beautiful. And it kind of starts nowhere and goes nowhere. But eventually, the road on down will develop, and the trail will be extended. And the theory is, let's get what we can while we can. I don't want to see that abandoned, because that's definitely needed along that road. That's a major thoroughfare.
And if there's a reasonable chance of it happening in the future, then I think I could support that. But I think there's some instances where you could just look at it and say there's just not any chance of any significant enough development occurring down at the end of this trail where we stand a chance of requiring it in the future. And,
You know, I think that'll, what you're talking about is likely to be one of the outcomes of this plan. I know in the past I've dealt with it. When you say checkerboard, I know all about checkerboard. I've dealt with it.
Southern
But
Pacific?
if, you know, if there's a noble enough goal and it's recognized as something that the community wants and should be done, then, you know, it'll be done. And so I think, you know, part of the process we'll be embarking on is recognizing where these noble goals are for trail systems in the future. And that, what you're talking about will be just a kind of a fallout of the sign, I think.
a piece of that, and that's,
Yeah, but you use the word never and no likelihood and so forth. And what I have seen is that if you are owner of a black square and you got two reds either side of you, many times people want to do it voluntarily to make those match up because it benefits them. So what was that old James Bond movie, Never Say Never? So anyway, that can be part of this discussion. So
Okay.
I have a motion pending. I would just soon have a vote of the commission to make it official.
Oh, I forgot about that.
I know, it's
We were under
CRS.
discussion. Oh, my goodness. Clumsy me. Okay. Does everyone remember the motion?
Could you-
Mickey wants you to tell him.
Yeah, Jerry, just,
Huh?
Yep, the motion was that the staff be tasked to proceed forward to find alternate ways or ways to start formalizing this process so that each project gets considered for
Countywide.
trails application countywide as they come up. What's the best vehicle to start implementing this goal?
Okay. And that's the second.
This will be your last
Swan song.
opportunity as chairman to
Did I vote no against it?
call a question.
Oh.
No, you'll still be going to vote in the future. This is a
Oh.
call question.
Okay. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay, thank you for your presentation,
Thank you.
Christopher. I think that concludes our activities today. Thank you, Mr. Ramirez. Good to see you again. Paul, staff, I'll see you in a couple months.